It's just really wonderful to be here, and we feel really honored that we became part of this Sto Foundation program. So I think it is really, really wonderful. I thank you very much. The discussion we had with Ivana in spring really opened completely new box. Something was more or less forgotten. And I think it, in a way, it's just a bit of like amazing coincidence because it really comes into like rounding up our work and our experience. And based on this discussion, we decided that today we would present a bit about the research itself, and then we will continue with specific projects where the findings and our experience was used probably to its best. So I think we can come up together with this as part of our work, and I think that hopefully will be interesting enough for everybody as well. So you will take over now?
Okay. So anybody has any idea what this means? Is this diagram? This is the image of the city. This is how people actually, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but this is probably drawn by the Irina's mother-in-law at that time. And this is how she saw the city of Most, New Most. So this is the reduced idea of the city. So let's continue. This is a little bit about us, who we are. We were born here in Czech Republic. We have a home in Toronto. We work there, and we work, as mentioned before, in China. We always had some team from different companies, so it's never only our project, but we had a team of people who were helping us, supporting, and did work which we needed. But on every project you will see later on, we had a substantial contribution, and decision-making was really ours. So these are, a few images what we did. So you see different, very different projects we have done. This is just to give you some idea. So back to this research. We were introduced by Dr. Ševčík by one lecture during our studies about the image of the city, which was research done by Mr. Kevin Lynch, who was teaching at MIT. He was basically a professor of the urban design. The idea was that the modern architects established the urban design as a five basic principles, based on 5 basic principles, which was the living era, working era, the recreation, traffic, and the green. And they reduced, Corbusier and other guys reduced city on that. And Mr. Kevin Lynch saw that it's a little bit more complicated. So at that time, in late 50s and 60s, there was some revision of this modernistic approach to urban design. And he developed method and describing the city different way. And for that, he was using 5 different elements, which was places, paths, or I shouldn't say roads, but paths. Places are basically squares or nodes, areas where people can meet, gather, and so on, like a city squares. The paths are the logical connection between those places. And each path has its beginning and it's the end, and goes to a very logical question, not like the architects are usually designing. The third element is the area, which you can recognize, for example, in Prague would be, let's say, old town or little town. area which has a certain characteristic and common elements which bring them together. And usually you can recognize the border of that which continuing or connecting with the other area and has maybe some subcenters or some points like a gates. You are passing from one area to the other area. It's limited by size, by the walking distance, and so on. The fifth element is the landmarks. Landmarks are it can be building, it can be tree, it can be the statue or monument or anything like that with a special characteristics you can recognize. You see it once and you remember forever. Or when you are passing several times, you see I was there and I can return there. So this gives you different description of the city and gives you totally different approach to that. So this idea is supported by Christian Norberg Schulz with the concept of existential space in architecture, and it's a little bit more complicated. The problem is when people are mentally handicapped or sick, they cannot develop this image in their mind. So they are moving from a linear way. They are moving, along the way they recognize, and they cannot develop in their mind broader concept. The other problem is has small kids who are developing this kind of idea. The other problem is you may have people who are very healthy, mentally very healthy, they don't have any problem, but still they cannot develop the image because there is a problem with the city, with the environment. Environment is sick, not the people. So I'm not going to read this. This is something about these different elements. You can look at that, but if anybody has interest, we can go back to that. Mr. Lynch was researching 3 areas in US, Boston, Beacon Hill, in Los Angeles, one area in New Jersey. He published a book which next year would be 60 years of the first publishing. So when we were studying, there was a time, a single moment in time, when the city of Most was being destroyed and a new city was developed, new city was built. And we were there at the same moment, and we were using the method of Mr. Lynch to investigate this environment. So people were same who were living in old historical town of Most, who was being destroyed, and they were moved to new town. So we had from same people 2 different images of the environment.
Which we should say is a very unique situation. It has never happened before and after. I think that's what is very interesting about that.
It would be very expensive for anybody to do this research now, to destroy the city just to have the same result. So just to make some description, city of Most, you see, was actually surrounded by open pit coal mines, and there was a basically conflict between values. The communists saw the value in the coal, and other people saw the value in the man-made environment. So the whole research has a set about 6 or 7 parts. One is to interview people who are living there. The second part is to research the historical documents, to go through the text of the history of the place, what happening, to understand how the physical reality was actually built. The third part is to go through the city ourselves. We knew the method, we knew what we should look for, So we were like how to say?
Well, I think he calls it educated observers.
Educated observers, yeah.
So you have like several people who would go through different parts of the city, and they would try to notice the significant elements or significant features, and then they create their own graphic image of the city. That is perhaps a bit different than the people we interviewed.
So the other part was to talk to the city planners and developers and ask them what they think and how they see the city, what's happening and why. So we got a pretty good idea what the city it's about and how what is happening. So you see the city of almost before the demolition started. You see the main church and you see the mining activity around that. This is a city when in a year, 1964, there was about 30,000 inhabitants living there. This is the old historical core. And this is the year where government decided to demolish the city. So nothing could be built there, nothing could be repaired. It was, like the procession of the funeral, just demolish it. And you see what was happening there. There were a few movies filmed there during the demolition. One of them was the bridge of Remagen. So some famous movie stars were here.
And they were basically using the old city that, because it was to be demolished anyway, so they used that situation and use it in the movie.
Yeah, but you can see almost in that city. This is how it is. There is a cut through the earth and through the buildings at the same time.
Yeah, and you can even see some of the layers of coal in there already. So we were there, I remember, if I may jump in, sorry about that. I remember once we were there and we looked at this pit, which was really huge, huge hole in the ground. And then there were literally houses chopped through, like you could see the section through a house, because they were just demolishing it as they went on with the mining pit.
The professionals said that there was just a few buckets of coal, that it doesn't make sense to really do it. But anyway, this is the city when it was gone. This is how the city ended up. We met some man who was born in Most, and he said, I would like to take my grandson to show him when I was born. And there was nothing. So this was really story. And this is how they build, how they see the new city of Most.
And then the old Most used to be over here. So it's just a pond now. So
this is part of the historical research. We went through the very substantial archive, which was available to us. And one of the important things in the old city of Most were 3 squares. One, which was used as a market. So there was the market here. The second one was, they call it church, because there were 2 churches, one and the other one. And this third one, which was the youngest one, was used as a terminal, the bus terminal. So you can see some historical images about that space. And this is how the city was developed. There were 2 roads, one going from Prague into the Germany, into the Saxon area, and the other one along the mountains from Teplice to Karlsbad, and the city was basically developed around that. So this is the historical development. The dates are approximate. I don't have the exact dates for that, but anyway, this is how it happened. And this is the city which never exists like that. This is the old and new town together, as a, in a planning stage, and you see the difference in the environment.
And as well over here. Yeah. So this is the old city, and this is the new city. So it's just, from that picture you can see the difference right away.
So when we were interviewing people, first question we asked was, what comes to your mind when you hear the word most? And they were actually describing for the old city in 95%, 3 squares. First, second, third, the church and the way.
Mountain.
Mountain, and this was the way to the railway station. Same thing here, and this was in about 95%, exactly like that. And these people were very ordinary people, they were no educated people, and so on, just people we met. And this is the new city. So here they were describing spaces. Here, for the description of the new city, they were describing individual volumes, individual buildings. So this is the fundamental difference. This was the old man, and he said, this is the main boulevard, big roads, and blocks on the right side, blocks on the left side. This is how he described it. There was somebody who said that they recognized their entrance into their buildings according to the cars parking in front of their entrance. So when was a weekend and cars were gone, these people were lost. And there were situations like that, and many stories which unfortunately I don't remember as much. So these are the different results of the research. So we were trying to match graphically show what people are talking about. This is the old city, this is the new city, new most, and this is the intensity, how they're describing things. So you see 1, 2, 3 third square, the road, railway station, the Hněvín, I think it's this one, and a few other things around. And here you have the one main road, which was a streetcar going through, the other one, and few areas where were the blocks and few points. This is according to the interviews. So these areas which were built in 1950s, according to the social realism principles. So these buildings were, first of all, there was a lot of greenery, and second of all, it was built by the bricks, out of bricks. And the layout of the apartment was quite generous at that time. And the architects were actually studying in 1930s, so there was a pretty good apartment. I'm sorry. So this is according to the our understanding of the city, what we saw, and this is critical point. So we were trying to recognize where are the problems. When we interviewed people and so on, we said, okay, we see the problems here. There are some barriers. There is no city center at all. It's nothing, and so on. So this is how we describe from the tape. We were listening to that and making marks for everything they marched, and this is the age and education of people we were interviewing. So you see, it's very normal. It's not too many people. Because of the outcry of the historic departments, communists said that they will salvage the church, and they decided to move it because of the historical architectural significance. So they move it, and we were there when the church was actually moving. It took 3 months to move it 800 meters. And this is in a new location, so it lost everything what building can lose. So we said, okay, why didn't you, if you can move the church, why cannot you move the whole city center? Because in new city center, there were living 0 people, and here there were living about 15 or 18,000 people. The density of the environment was quite significant. Here you see this is the city center comparing to the Wenceslav Square environment. You see, few buildings which cannot create anything. No space, no density, no activity. So basically, there was lost center for people. So this is old and new city together, and what we did, not like Mr. Lynch, we said, okay, why don't we make it? Why don't we do it around a different way? Why don't we take the image and create ideal image? What should be fixed? How should be done? And what would make the image much stronger, and people would feel like in a city? So we tried to actually develop, we went the other way around than he did. And this was our recommendation for the local government, city government, and architects and planners, and we were discussing what we think needs to be done. So, and this is the old most. Like that. So the contemporary urban design, it's based mostly on the aesthetical principles. Make it nice, make it beautiful, make it strong ideas like the Champs-Élysées in Paris and other things which we learned. And you see the people who trying using the rational way how to solve the city problems and so on. And this is how people today are planning the city. So it's useless, and it's no meaning to that. It's a disaster. There is no city as such, or this lady who is doing very beautiful computer images about the city, but it's just the creation of the aesthetics. There's no meaning, nothing. It's a very, very, very wrong approach as we see it. So in China, because we did a lot of things in China, they have a different approach. We must, when we design something, we must prove that every apartment has a sun. These are the shadows cast by the buildings. So we must prove that every apartment on a ground floor or second floor, if ground floor was occupied by something else, has enough sun during the day. Okay.
Okay, so maybe I can take over now.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So based on that previous, on this plan, I think this is absolutely amazing but generally they use computers to prove that no building casts shadow on the other building, so there would not be enough sun according to the standards for everybody. There is enough. And every residential building in majority of China has to be facing south with plus minus 15 degrees. So imagine how can you work with this kind of situation? So how can you create a real city in this kind of environment? As well, I remember that one of these computer softwares was even able to put the buildings on the plan. So in that case, you don't even need an architect or urban planner. The computer does it for you because the computer is using the algorithm of providing enough sun for everybody. So when we began working on special particular projects, this is, for example, a low-rise commercial area. It was supposed to be the kind of lifestyle area with bars and boutiques, etc. My feeling was that I have to come up with the idea how to build Zlatá ulička, or Golden Lane, which is the most famous little part of Prague Castle, again in 21st century, in order to balance or to come up with an antidote to that environment of those high-rises that are spread evenly on the land, and they don't provide the kind of closed human-scale environment. And this was one of the really perfect situations to do that. So we, on the other hand, basically used a cabin lane system, realizing that we need to create specific areas. We need to create nodes or plazas, the paths, and we need to structure that environment so it would be easy for the human mind to walk around and to remember it and to create the image of that particular area. So that's what we did. And basically it's all pedestrian area, all pedestrian development with the main paths and nodes, etc., being carefully planned. And you see here one of the way to create the areas was basically saying, okay, this will be built first to phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But even in the architecture, we were trying to figure out certain differences so each area would be recognized. This is another scheme, basically providing the kind of strategy, how people get through in order to get to the lake and enjoy that waterfront. We were basically trying to develop as well the idea of where the major shopping or restaurant areas should be, etc. It was our guess in this case. And then the task was how you organize a team of 10, 12 people who were working on this project. It's 125,000 square meters. It's about 40 to 50 buildings, 2 to 3 floors. And then you want to give it a coherent appearance, but at the same time, you want to make it very kind of the appearance of natural growth or natural development. So we developed a certain system of about 3 or 4 elements. First of all, yes, we wanted to have a significant landmarks. So they are shown here, the locations of those places, like we even designed a viewing tower, all glass. It was a kind of slash, like historic slash contemporary pagoda. Then we developed ideas about so-called large scale and small scale. This is the system of the paths from nodes to different places, the outer system, the inner system. And here, the landmarks and the idea of using the small and large scale, which you can see here. So large scale was basically glass, mainly, and the small scale were much more divided, kind of smaller scale, filling pillars, we can say. And based on that, we developed a menu of elements, like only this kind of windows, only this kind of facade elements, this kind of roof elements, etc. And then we have several different people working on the projects. So they were able to play with that, but only through using those elements from the menu. So we were able to develop very kind of diversified, very playful appearance, but at the same time, there was a certain unity to that. So this is the final master plan and final rendering. And then we have few photos from the construction when it's done, when it's finished. like here. Before, there was the canal before that because the lake was drenched, so it was closed. Then after, it's over here, the Communist Party chief in the area was absolutely convinced that there have to be copies of all Chinese bridges, which made me really mad. I thought it was an absolute disaster. But eventually, it somehow worked together, so I was able to kind of appreciate that. You can see certain, what we call small architecture, small amounts buildings spread around. Each building almost different, but just they still kind of make some sense together. Okay, some night view. These are some of the landmark elements at the end of indoor shopping mall, and some little other details which actually really created nice and walkable and playful environment. Based on this, we approached another project in a similar way. We called it Corso. So first of all, I had to explain to the Chinese developer what Corso is. So I spent about 2 or 3 days just researching about Corsos all around the world. So now I know there are certain boulevards named Corso in Milan, or there is a Corso in France, and there is one Corso which is called, now I don't remember, in Australia. And I had to present the ideas of Corso to them because
there was a strong tradition in Czech Republic that our parents were actually going on Corso for
around the square.
It means to go around,
that's right,
and meet people and so on.
But what was interesting about this, that he was actually in competition with yet another development nearby. And that developer came with a movie and the architects presented very strong theme, which was based on one of the French Mediterranean's little city. So our developer got scared, and now we had to come up with something else. So eventually he got hooked onto this idea of Corso. So we were not just buying or lending ourselves, taking an image of an Italian little town or something like that, but it was a little bit similar. So it was a very, very interesting moment. So when we began designing it, the idea was how you work with that environment. It is an artificial block, very, very big piece of land that was artificially drenched, and bulldozers came, and instead of fish ponds, they created this lake and the different pieces of land that were eventually used as residential developments. And this was our part. And now everybody was trying to figure out how to use this little bay for some spine. And I thought that was not a good idea because it was facing an island. So that's why I said, okay, let's do it a different way. Let's have our main spine somewhere here, face the lake, face the water. And that's where I thought our Corso or a little street can happen. And that's what we did with a significant landmark here when we basically created the main axis of all other parts. And he got hooked. He bought this, and so we were able to go ahead and develop this whole idea. Here you can see several different analyses of the main spaces and the connection, the public space. It had to be structured such a way that for the residential buildings, which are really tall high-rises on the edge, it has to be very private. So not everybody has the access to that. But the street in the middle was supposed to be public. So what we did as well is that we created, because there is underground parking at every residential development in China, so we raised this parking onto the ground level, made a garden on top of it, and we said everybody who wants to get there must go up the stair, which is a kind of natural barrier. And I think it worked quite well. So this is the section through the Corso, the little street with some retail, some other semi-commercial, semi-residential uses.
Soho means small office, home office.
Right. but it accidentally has some other meaning for us as well. This is the parking garage with the greenery and park on top of it. Oh, no, I think I screwed up here. Oh, it's okay now. Sorry. And some sections of the same idea. So we were able to provide some daylight into the parking garage. Not so interesting. But then again, you have a problem. How you develop a reasonably human scale, a reasonably varied architecture of the little street. So we did something similar to the idea we used in the Ligonti project. And again, we developed about 3 different systems. Some of the elements were basically stucco facade with windows. Some of it was just glass facade. They were mainly landmark elements, and some of it was completely like an old building with masonry wall and little windows in that. And we differentiated as well with the color of the facade. Straw facade, straw colors, very well used here. And so these are some of the renderings of the little street. Again, some main body elements, the landmarks, the Corso type elements, and now the way how we structured, how we used them, creating certain rhythm. So for example, here was the staircase going up to the top of the garage. So the corners were emphasized. This is the main landmark, etc., etc. Some of the elevations of the street. This is the 3D, and a few more details. And now I can show you as well what it looks like in reality. So I was really pleased they built it that way. It's really, really nice. So you can see the very tall buildings as a background, and this is the little street going all the way here, and some details of that as well. So we used pretty much feeling and elements of small European city or / small Chinese city, and we brought it back to the development, which is very contemporary.
Oh, it's about 300,000 square meters. It's a huge project done within about 18 months.
I did something wrong, or you did something wrong?
So, the work has to go very fast, and wasn't really fun to do all those things. I'm sorry about that. Technology doesn't work. Okay. Yeah. So this may give you some idea what has to be done, how many fast decisions you have to make, and there is not much time to fool around. So this is one of the few projects we work together. Otherwise, it would be a matter of divorce. So this was a hotel on the southern part of China, on an island called Hainan. And we got this piece of land, which was basically sand and nothing, some palms. Here were some rice fields and mountains behind. And this is after we left.
I would just make a little comment here. Hainan is considered something like Hawaii of China. It is almost tropical environment and perfect for resorts and vacationing.
So this is about 700 meters prime location of the beach with very nice sand. The only problem was that the sea was actually quite steep, so there was not much to really go to swim into the sea. But anyway, in this resort, when people come, the most important is the view on a water, on a sea. when people come, they wanna see the water. So we have about 200 meters from the sea. We couldn't build anything, so this was setback. And so we said, okay, let's create a hill. So because this was flat, we said we wanna raise the land here about 12 meters, create some terraces, and building will be sitting on that, and everybody will have a view on a sea. In the middle, we put a swimming pool, which was about 80 meter long. And when we create a hill...
We should mention that 8 is the lucky number in China.
Yeah. When we create a hill, so the beginning of the water was on the ground, and here on the other side was above, one floor above. So we got, two levels of the swimming pool. Along this pipe was the restaurant, bars, conference center, spa, and so on. And here, when the entrance was the lobby area. So we create some logical paths along the side with the gardens and other areas, and divide it into 3 parts. Because when we develop this area, we raise the value of this land. This is one of the important elements for the developers. You have to develop the strategy when you raise the value of this land. So when they put money here, they are getting more money from this piece of land. So and there are some landmarks when we strategically locate along the spine and so on. So this is the spine as you see it from the sea, and here you can see final result. So this is the swimming pool. This is the another swimming pool which was under this long swimming pool. There was a sea landscape and the other building. So this is how you see it at night from the entrance, water, sea, blah blah blah. And this is when you enter, because it was important to create some kind of wow effect. When you come, you are behind a hill which we create. You don't see anything. When you come to the reception area, suddenly you have this view. So you don't look at the bill, how much your stay will cost. And so every guest room is basically one villa with its own apartment, a lot of details in the aspect. And one thing which we didn't realize only after was built and we went there, that when you are in a swimming pool, you have a horizon 10 centimeters. So you see the water totally different. You have a totally different viewing experience from that. We created a courtyard with the walking around, which was the conference center, conference rooms, larger area here and sitting area here. This is just to give you the idea about the guest rooms, lobby, and so on. And this is the entrance into the guest room. There are 2 rooms, one on each side. So when you connect it inside, you have a larger area, walls, blah, blah, blah. And it looks like a little village there. This is the other project which I was working at. This is interesting because we use the same area for the outside and for the inside of the hotel as well. It is the same principle, same building. This was a hotel built about 1990s by some Chinese architect. And when they finish it, it's in a Chinese style, and when they finish it, it didn't work from the day one. It was basically wrong way designed and done. So when the developer bought it, he asked me to do something. So I said, we have to demolish everything. And they said, this is designed by famous Chinese architect. We cannot demolish it. So we demolished only part of it. there was a very beautiful tree here, which we used as a center point. So this is how we prepared the site. I have to mention one more thing. This area was used for the government officials. So there was one room in one building, I think it was this one, where it was used only for Chinese president when eventually he comes to the city once in 2-3 years. So everything was ready just for him. Nobody else could be there. It was very shabby. It was very poor apartment. So we set up the concept that we will create gardens as areas and connect everything inside the area along the lake. This was the artificial canal, to have a protection for this government. Create new lobby and create some logical connection of everything. The borders are very, very natural by the water and so on. So we create some trees. And these are the landmarks, some pavilions in the garden, because this city, it's the name of the city is Suzhou, and in this city there are very famous Chinese gardens. Some of them are on a UNESCO heritage list. And and these gardens are from 17th, 18th century. So I took the opportunity to create 2 gardens more in 21st century. So same principles like in outside, I use inside to structure the building, because we had few pavilions which are connected by corridors, enclosed corridors. There are spaces, bigger ones, smaller ones. Everything is based on a tree. So this is the atrium going through the restaurant building and so on. In this case, basically the areas are based on the development, because these were older buildings, these were older buildings, so they are a little different than the new buildings, the size and design of the guest rooms and so on. So this is the final things. I don't have time to go through the details, but anyway, this is how it ended up. This is the new part of the entrance. This is the corridor when leads to the lobby. So the Ivana and I were actually able to bring Tonino Lamborghini brand, hotel brand, into China. So
and I would like to mention that it's another long story how Tonino Lamborghini ended up this Chinese hotel, but I don't want to explain it.
Mr. Lamborghini was my driver for one day. So this is I have to tell you that. We create artificial waterfall, and I didn't have a chance like Frank Lloyd Wright, but I create little pavilion about the waterfall. These are some views from the hotel from inside, and if you go to the website, you can read the response from the guests. You can see some comments what they like and what they don't like.
Yeah, I think we have to speed up a little bit. Here, this project is more about working with the scale of the buildings. It is a new center, like secondary center in Shanghai, that is supposed to serve about 1 million people. So I was thinking, this is like a center of Prague, basically, when you work on it. This is what we got. These are residential areas, and this was supposed to be the commercial / civic center of this whole area. The area
if I may step in. This was the result of the international competition, which was won by some German architecture firm. And even though Chinese took it as a winning scheme, they were not really happy because they saw it really doesn't work. So they asked us if we can redevelop it or do something.
By the time we began doodling and making some sketches, it was evident that this, which you may probably read as, let's say, blocks of buildings in Prague, let's say Vinohrady or so. When we used the same scale map of Shanghai, we came to the idea that it was completely off. So this was totally out of scale. So we used this comparison in order to convince the city officials, the planning department officials, that there was something wrong with the scheme, the winning scheme.
The Wenceslav Square is about 700 meters, so this is twice as big.
And we began working on the new scheme, which had to, in a way, maintain the kind of original idea of radiant streets, ending up in the middle, which was the main node of the center of this administrative office buildings as well as city hall. But otherwise, we were adding many more details and developing much smaller scale. These are some of the ideas of the main areas, some of the ideas about people moving along the main spines. This is the 3D rendering in comparison to the original scheme, and here as well. I think that's about it. Like, I just want to give you an idea that what we learned from most, the research about the old city, new city, it was somewhere there, and it was very easy to go back to that and try to create a more livable environment. Olympic City is one of the important projects for us because we had to do the main concept in 11 days. Including negotiating the contract. And it was one of the most famous, one of the very few first projects we did together with our Chinese partners when we set up our office in 2003. And everybody was still remembers all the details of the process. When we visited the site at first, was one Friday afternoon in July 2003, I noticed that what was significant about it, that we could see the very main landmark of the city of Tianjin, which is the very, very tall TV tower. So by the evening, like 10 o'clock at night, we had to come up with first ideas. And the idea was basically that we would try to feature that TV tower in our development. And it was mainly through developing the commercial area along the spine of the site, and then the other two areas would be developed according to the necessary standards of shadows and sunshine, etc., because they were the residential areas. So here is the final master plan that was done in 3 days, I think, because in the meantime, we would have to provide information for a big model. Model was built at the same time. So you can see that it's not 100% coherent project, though altogether this was basically 1 million square meters. I think it was 550 square meters, 550,000 square meters of residential, about 450,000 square meters of the commercial, including the department stores, some of the kind of mid-rise office buildings, the kind of semi-livable, workable areas, etc. Some of the main analysis, main spaces, some of the connections, the areas, phase 1, phase 2, in the commercial area, the barrier between the two landmarks, the model. We took the photos of the model for the final report by about 2 o'clock morning one day, so some of the details are not done yet. And this is the idea about connecting visually the main commercial street with the tower, and this is how it works in real life. This is the initial sketch. It was like 8 by 8 centimeters. So it's just an interesting project from this point of view that the landmark as such was really used in winning scheme. Yeah.
In Chinese landscape architecture, they have one of the concepts for the Chinese gardens they call it borrowed view. So the landmark can be outside your garden, right outside your area, which you can use and incorporate it into your concept. So this is the way how they did it.
And we should mention that it was a competition between developers to be able to buy the land. It was like 4 or 5 companies.
Yeah.
Our developer was somewhere in the middle with the price they offered, the cost, the money they offered to buy the land. But nevertheless, they got the project, so we were very happy, and we hope that the scheme, the concept itself, helped as well. The final report that was done basically in 1 week time was about 80 pages. Okay, so this is just the continuation of the same project. I arrived in Tianjin. I was told that I had to come up with the idea how to design facades and architecture of about 14 buildings in phase 1, and I had 1 day to do that. So, because nothing else was fixed, I didn't even know what kind of layout of the units and apartments will be there, and there were like 30 of them. So, the next day, I came up with the idea that I would superimpose special walls or special kind of architecture elements on those buildings. Like we had this like 4 different ones. And I said, once we do that, everything else can change. There could be a few more floors, few more or less balconies. We can change the windows or whatever you like, but we would keep this. It would emphasize the main axis of this particular phase 1, and that would be it. And the client said yes, and we got green light, and we went on. So that was just on the side.
We came there for the first sketch we did in July 23rd, and in November they start construction.
But they got the permit, they got the concept approved in December or January afterwards, and the permit was following. Or like it was just completely horrible. But they built the first buildings in about a year. Okay, so that was it. This is what it looks like. You can see some of my curved elements right over here. That's what it looks like. And I think we can just go quickly through a few more projects because we are almost at the end of it.
This is, this was a competition for this. This is just, just very briefly, this was a competition for about 4.3 square kilometers of the new CBD, Central Business District, in one of the town.
This is like a satellite city of Shanghai. Because originally they were trying to get people out of congested Shanghai. They developed about 10 satellite cities.
So this was the exercise which we did in about 2 weeks' time for this concept. And this was how the site looks 2002 and 2001. And this was how the site looks in 2007, I believe, 2008. They built it very quickly. We may not be happy about many things which were done there, but basically the basic principles were kept. I remember there was when we presented the scheme, there was 18 schemes, ours and plus another. Not 18, I'm sorry, 5, but 18 judges. And 17 voted for us, and 1 was voting for the Chinese scheme.
And we should mention that this meeting, the main presentation, took place on Sunday. They were all major, like the chiefs or the main people from all the departments of the city government were there, like 40 people around a big table. We would present to them. They were getting the reports of the schemes about 2-3 days ahead of time, so they could study a little bit. We presented to them. Actually, the chief planner of Shanghai was like a really important position. The lady said, how come that European architects, the foreign architects, are actually able to design Chinese city while you guys, Chinese, are not? So we were happy about that. And in about 2 weeks, we would get comments right on the spot or in writing next day. In about 2 weeks, we would have to rework the report, absorb comments, and then in 2 weeks it was approved, and then they could go ahead with the building.
There is an era here which we suggested to build a school, and the mayor of the city asked if the school has to be there or if there can be something else. We said, you know what, school would be fine. What we find out later that his brother bought this land and he wants to build, develop the residential and make a lot of money on that. So
yeah, there were some political issues.
Anyway, these are a few other projects. This is Ivana's project.
I think it's just, I think you just can kind of see on your own that there was we were always trying to adhere some strong concept with main access, main walkable space. So again, going back to our research, I think it somehow is still related. I'm not just crazy about showing this project, but Jan loves it, so it's there.
There was one of our scheme. First of all, I designed and built this little restaurant, which is a seafood restaurant, and it has 1,100 chairs inside just one restaurant. And later on, we were developing a whole site with the main square, close square, and so on. This was one concept we did for the competition for the Darling Harbour in Australia. We didn't win. Anyway, so what we have learned, that read it yourself.
I don't want them. No, don't read it. I think we explained enough. Okay. I think in general, Irina is very right that whatever we did was really influenced by knowledge we learned from the city of Most, and it's true. And we didn't realize that so well until we talked to you. So thank you very much. And I think we are now ready for questions, right? So do we have any questions? Not too many. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, Tomáš.
Yes, I have a question. Two things that strike me is that you were talking about this hotel built by a very famous Chinese architect, which was unusable, which you had to remodel. Then you were saying that there was people asking, how come a foreign couple, foreign architects can build a city and the Chinese architects cannot? Have you seen any changes in China recently? I mean, is their architecture or their architects or their urban planning or their architectural design, is it changing? Are they and how is it changing? Is it by adopting to some things they've learned from the Western architects as you two, or have you seen any changes in that attitude in those many years you've been traveling and working in China?
Well, I would say definitely yes, because I remember, for example, maybe 10, 12 years ago, they got this very young fellow who joined our office right after graduating from university. And when I talked to him, he could not imagine that there would not be enough work. So there was such, like especially the first decade of the century, it was so much to do that everybody would be able to get to touch some really important big projects. So young people, young architects were, I think, learning as they went, and they were learning fast because they had to. So I think in this case, you just cannot imagine that they would not be learning and then they would not improve. As well, as you probably all know, all major companies from around the world flooded China. So not only Zaha Hadid or actually some of these designer architecture companies, they came a little bit later, but all major commercial companies, Esalen, Gensler, well, Foster was there as well, but PPF.
Only who wasn't there was Renzo Piano and
Bamish and Bamish.
And Frank Gehry didn't build anything there. Otherwise, everybody has some.
So one way or the other, just being able to work on such projects, walking along, observing it, you have to learn. As well as developers and investors, so that the Chinese architects, engineers traveled. You know that very well. So they went to Australia, they went to America, they went to Europe. They would spend one day in each country, naturally. That's the way they did it. But they would learn and learn and learn. So I think in general you can say yes, Chinese architecture improved quite a bit. And because of even companies like Sto, bringing all the technology there, I think, you know, you have to start to be worried as who will be the next great country with great architects. It's not that straightforward and simple, but I think it is very true.
The other thing I would say, you know, you have to, as an architect, you have to learn by building something, and so certainly you are making mistakes. So if you don't make mistakes, you don't learn anything. So question is, who is going to pay for those mistakes? So there is a lot which was built, and when you see how it's done, you can actually do something different later on. So the sheer volume of was everything built there, it's unbelievable, and it's getting better and better. Second things, there are architects who are studying abroad and coming back, and they are really getting into the world-class architecture level. So I think it's getting better. At the beginning, everything what I draw was fine. Later on, you really have to work hard to compete with them.
Okay. Anybody else?
I've got a follow-up question on that. So for these young people here, are there still opportunities in China? You know, is it still a place worth going because that you can actually learn something there and succeed and build a lot of projects? Or did it change?
We gave the opportunity several, or I don't know, 15, 20 young architects from all over the world were working in our company. And it is getting harder and harder because question is if you want to work there, what you can offer to them, what you can offer to Chinese architecture, what do you know, what they don't know. So basically they know the language, they are very skillful with computers, they are very fast and they can do a lot of things. They know the local code, they know the local habits, local values, because the biggest difference between European or Western architecture and Chinese architecture, it's in values. Not in shapes, but in values. Just to give you the idea, when you are designing the apartment buildings, master bedroom and the living room has to face south. Question is why? Because the sun was the only source of the heat when there was no heat in a building. So people want to have a sun for the heating, for the heat, and also for the hygiene. You know, the sun is sanitizing the building of gems and so on. And even now there is a heating, there is air condition, everything still has to face south. When it's in Chinese code that apartment has to face south. And if some Hong Kongese didn't do it, they didn't follow the code, they built it east-west, they said there is a sun too. Nobody bought those apartments. Nobody wanted. You have to follow the local habits, local values. You have to understand the culture. You have to understand all of those things. So if anybody has a chance to go to China, go there, definitely.
But I would say
it's tough.
We observed that every new person needed about 2 years to be a little bit on their own. So first of all, first 6 months you spend forgetting what you learned before or unlearning. And then there is the learning curve that you need to go through, learning new things and learning to be part of the team and be able to design or to work on projects that are there. And then by the end of that, when you are about 2 years in the office, you are probably ready to do a little bit more independent work. So it really takes time, it needs complete commitment. And by now, I would say, unless you have something very special, I don't know, this could be like extremely good knowledge of computer programming, for example, you have to learn the language as well. Because without Chinese, without Mandarin, I think by now you are not employable. Yeah, that's the way it is.
We were in the University of Liberec. We were doing some workshops. We gave students large projects, and they had 1 day to come up with the concept. So they have to learn how to make a fast decision, how to decide, how to read, how to present it, because they started 9 o'clock in the morning, and 7 o'clock evening, it has to be done with a simple scheme, which has some logic, which has some merit. We had two groups, each 10 people each, and anyway, they have to know how to present, because as one architect who is probably now dead told me when I was young, if you cannot get the idea across the table, we will go for the beer. It would be much smarter way. So we have to learn how to present it. We have to tell how to get the idea on the table, how to present it, how to make it simple, and how people can understand. And it's okay, this makes sense, let's continue that. So this is one thing you have to learn. You have to, because if you make a wrong decision and you are doing fast, you have a chance to fix it. Okay, this doesn't go anywhere, so you can fix it. You can go a little bit back. But if you are afraid to as our friend told, to ušpinit papír, smash the paper or something, it's very hard to do anything.
I think we should ask for more questions. If there are.
Okay, more questions.
More questions. Any more questions? Yes, go ahead. Just use your voice.
Okay, I can try. I have a question about most, because... Yeah, thank you. That's a great feel. I have a question about Most, because I'm really interested in that town. And a few years ago, I saw a document when there were people from Most talking about Most and about that strange situation of moving. And there were some people, they saw that there was a moment people were living in a new town, but they were still coming back to Old Town for their cultural life. And for me, it's really interesting. I can't imagine that feeling of seeing my old town like being demolished or so. And also, someone mentioned there that now we see it was something bad because we destroyed a beautiful town and so on. But someone mentioned that it was great for a lot of people because the condition of old houses it was terrible, and people were actually happy about their new home, about hot water and comfortable living. So I would like to ask you, how was that atmosphere in your point? Were they really happy, or you know? Thank you.
This is matter of values. Okay, if the hot water is the value you really appreciate, it's a value comparing to the old one, which you don't have even the good toilet or good bathroom. So this is how you see it, and it looks that from the personal point of view, the apartments in New City were better, no question about that. They were not too big, they were not too great, but still much better than in the old town. But you are not living just in the apartment, you are living in the city, and you want to feel that you are part of some community, which old city gave you. In a new city, you were lost. You didn't have a center, you didn't have a chance to meet people somewhere. If you go for the date with some girl, where are you going to go? And these are very simple things which are happening in people's life, you cannot fulfill. And at that time there were some terrible things, like people couldn't move out of the city. They couldn't get job anywhere else. When they got there, they cannot move. They were sick. They want to move out. The people in the hospital, they didn't tell them that you are the cancer or something. They said, we are just a little bit sick, but this is going to be fine. But they have to treat it. They were treating you like you have a cancer, but they didn't tell you. And the officials from the city, they said, we didn't need to have a report on the weather, on the conditions of the air. We just go and count the announcement on a public board how many people died, which was horrible things which was happening there. And what was the most difficult I believe that the officials were just lying to you. There was nothing you can trust. Like in those days, nowadays, is the fake news and all of that. This is the terrible things which is happening. So what we were trying to tell the officials is the truth about the city, how it is, what can be done about it, what we thought can be done about it. They didn't listen, and so on. But this is how it is.
If I may, it's like if you live, let's say, in Jižní Město, right? And that's all you have. So you cannot go down to downtown, to Old Town, to a restaurant or to a bar in Malá Strana or somewhere else. It's just that what you have. And I think that's what happened in Most. So that's why people naturally would go to the Old Town as long as it was still standing, and some of the restaurants or bars or whatever places were still there, clubs, they would go there because it was just natural place of gravitation.
So we are talking about the urban design here. We are not talking about many other things. This is from our professional point of view, how to design the city. And if the importance is the traffic, because for example in this new Most, in the old town, from sidewalk to sidewalk, it took about 5-6 seconds to go from the sidewalk to the sidewalk. In a new city, it took about 1 minute. With the traffic on one side, traffic in the middle, traffic on the other side. So this is something which you are not safe, and the city is about the safety. If you look at the ancient cities, like Jerusalem and so on, the first thing they built is the walls around, and they fill it with the building because of the safety. City is about safety even today, and especially North American cities with guns and violence. City is about safety. So you have to, as a designer, you have to look at that. You have to look at the values of democratic society. You have to include all of it into it. So it's not just the technical problem and beauty. architecture is not about beauty, period.
Yeah, do we have more questions? Yeah, go ahead. Just try your voice.
Not us. I have a very thin voice. It's okay, I'll try.
We can repeat it. Yeah.
I'd like to stick with the most question.
Yeah.
And the father. What you learned from the research we've been doing with Ivana as well. From what we learned, the architects back in Czechoslovakia, they were actually really familiar with the research you were doing with Jiří Ševčík, the contemporaries, or the architects of your age or younger maybe. So I was wondering, this knowledge you came up with, did you follow it up somehow in the later phases? Because if I'm not mistaken, there was a competition in 1980s to complete the center of Most. Yeah. And I was wondering, did the architects back then work with the knowledge you came up with, or did you follow up this question?
We don't know.
No, I know something about that. When we finished this research, we presented to the professors from this university. We presented to the in a city of most officials. We presented to the professors from the sociology and so on. Everybody rejected. They said for the sociologists, this is not enough. This is not enough people you interview. You have to have 1,000, 2,000. It would be relevant. 40 people, it's not relevant. The professor said, we are urban designers, professors. We know how to build a city. This is not good enough to build a city. We cannot measure anything. This is not scientific. So among our friends, this study was basically known, but not too much further. It was 2 articles published into magazine, one in Slovakia, one in Czech Republic. And so where was the competition? I think, some people know about that. But very honestly, we forgot about all this research. And when Irena called us, I was looking at the internet and I found that actually many references to that, and people actually know. But we have only one, because the original book is lost, and I have only one copy, which is a very terrible Xerox copy. This is the only things which actually left.
It's in my office now. Don't steal it.
Don't tell anybody.
Don't tell it. Well, if Jiří Ševčík would be, if it would be possible that he comes here, he was invited. We tried contacting him many times through many people, but unfortunately he doesn't leave the house anymore because he's not well anymore. But concerning the influence, for instance, Herzl and Kerel, when they were doing Barrandov sídliště, they have a direct reference that they created Barrandov based on this research. So probably we would find more influences like that, but I know Barrandov is really created based on this.
We followed one more research for the Vinohrady when architect Oberstein was in charge of the development of Vinohrady, or reconstruction of Vinohrady. He commissioned us with another study for Vinohrady, but it was a very different case. Here we were comparing 2 different, really totally different structures. In Vinohrady was much more what is important there, where are the landmarks, what to keep, what to demolish, and so on. It was very interesting, but very, very different.
Anybody else?
Let's go on.
So I have just a little bit more of information that I didn't say in the beginning. There is today, there was not only this lecture here in Prague, but there was a lecture in Graz. There was a lecture in Venice at the same time. What is very interesting is that Venice has an architect from Chile, and Graz has an architect from Brazil. So if you're thinking that we're too far being in China. It's not true. The world is just so connected. And I mean, thinking about that, the scale and the speed is just crazy, which of course I think it is crazy. But on the other hand, these people have studied at the same school you have studied. And I'm sure they would be doing a project for maybe 10 years, if 10 years was allowed.
Well, you know, what I would, if I may, sorry, I'm just stepping in, but I think, let's say China is now very questionable territory. There are some, all sorts of different issues why it might not be so easy to work there. But India or Africa, there are still places that might offer very, very interesting opportunities, maybe even Middle East. And I think if we have some young future architects here, you should not be looking at Europe only. The world is not Europe. The world is much bigger, and I think this is really important to remember. Okay?
And I think the capacity of adaptation on different markets for Czech people is just unbelievable. And I hope it's not only you two, but I hope it's a little bit the school and the way the school teaches you that you are usable in different environments and you just can make a living also. And I wanted to tell you that the November talks has 6 cities which we are part of. Like one of the cities is Stuttgart, Paris, London, Venice, Graz, and Prague. So we're part of a big network. And if you go on the Sto Foundation website, you will find information about everything that is happening around, with quite a lot of, how do you call it, tisková zpráva, press information. There's quite a lot of press information. So you sort of not only keep track what is happening here in Prague, but you can keep track now in November what's happening in all these 6 cities, which means 24 fantastic architects, landscape architects, urban designers, talking to students. And I must say that the Sto Foundation is putting this large organization and team together, and we're so happy to be part of it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's go home.